There's
Okay.
Hanisha.
Hey, Hanisha.
Hello, hello.
Okay, well, Carol is with us. Carol, when did you take your quals? What?
I did spring 2016.
Okay, so just over a year ago. Man,
I know. It seems like forever.
I am ready to have that feeling.
Yeah, it's a good feeling. Yeah, it's
Uh-huh.
good.
Well, we really appreciate you hopping on with us tonight and
Sure.
taking your time to spend with us. We're going to open up just in a word of prayer, and then I'll hand it off to you for a little bit, and then we'll go from there. All right, thank you, Father, for this time, Lord, that you have blessed us with to be able to come together, to be able to study and discuss and question God. Lord, help us to not take this lightly, Father. But you have put this opportunity in front of us to receive a PhD in communications, God, and we just ask for your grace and your mercy so that we can complete this task with excellence. Lord, bless our time together tonight and bless all of our individual studies, Lord. We just commit this to you. In your name we pray. Amen.
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 Okay. Well, I think everyone knows Carol. Carol was a huge help to us, you guys, if you don't realize it. Her and was it Amanda Joe that helped y'all compile that list?
Yes. Yep. Amanda and I worked on that.
All of the sample questions that were compiled from over the years, they did that, and I know that was a huge undertaking, but it has been a huge help. So thank you in advance for
You are welcome.
What you've done. But okay, well, we are all ears, and I'm not sure what direction you're planning on tonight, but we are here, and we will pop in with questions when we have them, and whatever. Okay.
Sounds great. I can tell you it's not going to have anything to do with grammar. I've been stressed on that one. Nor will it have anything to do with prepping for school, which I'm getting ready to do. So this is a nice break. So I guess my first question to y'all is, how are you guys doing? I guess I'm kind of coming in at the end of all the little guest speakers that you've had. So I don't necessarily want to retread on stuff that you feel pretty comfortable with, but you're getting close, right? I mean, it's what, 6? You have 6 more weeks, 5 more weeks?
5.5. So yeah, 5 from Thursday, which is frightening.
Yes, yeah, I know. When you get under the 8-week mark and then you get to 6 weeks, it gets a little scary. So how are you guys doing? Do you feel like you're well prepared? You're not prepared? You're apprehensive? Because I'll kind of tailor my experience maybe to where you're at or what you're feeling right now. That might be helpful, I guess.
I mean, I know for me, I'm so busy working full time. We just moved. We're planting a church. I'm a mom, I'm a wife. So it's just like the time that I have to study, it never feels like enough. I'm like, I need 5 more hours, but I have to go to bed. I get up in 4 hours, And so right now though, and I was telling Mary this earlier, I sort of feel like I can't see the trees from the forest. It's like I'm just in the midst of it all, and I can't really tell if what I'm doing is accomplishing stuff. Like I know I'm learning, but yet I don't know. I'm really overwhelmed by I don't know.
It's too much. Yeah, it's information overload.
It is, and I'm not really sure. Have I retained what I need to retain?
Yep.
So that's where I'm at. That's my fear, is that I'm just going to keep doing this, and it's going to get to the day and I'm going to be like, oh my gosh.
I don't know anything.
I don't know anything. I didn't study right. I didn't.
Yep.
So those are my fears. That's where I'm at right now.
Okay. That's good. How are you doing, John?
I'm scattered. I would admit that. I've been concentrating on the theory question, and I've written out what I think is a good answer, and then I set it aside now, and I've been working on the history test.
Okay.
And the theology. So.
Okay.
And I think I'm going to go ahead and do the qualitative a quantitative, qualitative test.
Okay.
I was batting back and forth whether to do the historical critical, but I just TA'd for the other class, and I'm going, well, you know, I kind of know the material.
Good. Okay.
So
good.
I'm gonna do that one.
Okay.
And you know, and I'm not sure I've seen an answer for that. Now of course
for quantitative.
Was Dr. Perry is teaching it now, and I, you know, Adrian and I TA'd for him. But I'm not sure I saw Dr. Frazier.
No. Yeah, no. My understanding is that for quantitative, at least everyone that I know that has taken it thus far, you're asked to design a study, a quantitative study. You're actually given data, so you don't have to worry about that. But but you're that's why Dr. Brown did all of his questions. So he gives you the information, and then you have to decide how you would proceed. So what kind of tests would you run? And then
not the statistic one. The
qualitative.
Qualitative.
Oh, qualitative. Right. Okay, so for qualitative, the questions so far have been also the same thing: designing a study.
Okay.
I know someone got an ethnography. They were doing ethnography. Another one got interviewing, dealing primarily with interviewing and focus groups.
So they give you.
They tell you. They'll say something like, John, you've been asked to, sample a population, blah, 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 blah. And you are, you're going to be conducting focus groups, interviews, and perhaps some kind of in-depth interviews. And they'll tell you sort of what the topic is and what the focus is. What would you do, or how would you design the study? And then you kind of have to run with it, knowing what you know about qualitative. And you can go in any direction you want, just as long as you have demonstrated that you could design a qualitative study. Now, that's what they've done in the past when Dr. Frazier was doing it. So I don't know if Dr. Perry will change it up, but my gut probably tells me it'll be something very similar.
Yeah. Okay. I was talking to someone who said it's a good idea to have a study in your mind that you're going to go and describe it.
Yeah. So
if they give you the study.
Yeah, they do. They usually do in the past, and Dr. Perry probably will do that. My suggestion, though, would be to look at 3 or 4 different types of qualitative studies, such as ethnography. I did a qualitative content analysis for my dissertation. I mean, try and kind of look at a couple different types.
Yeah.
And read a couple articles where those individuals did that, just so you're really familiar. That way, then when you go in there, if he throws you ethnography, you're like, cool, I know exactly what I need to do. Or if he throws you some other thing, you kind of know which direction to go. Yeah. So you'll probably be fine. So, Hanisha, how are you doing?
Sorry, got on mute myself. I am still, I just got done with class day before yesterday, summer class. So my focus was on that for a while, but now it's full throttle qualifying studies. So I'm taking more of a bird's eye perspective so far, but I'm going to be going super deep now once I've strategized my study plan and stuff like that. So my plan is to know 10 in-depth points per question, because you can only write that much for 2 hours.
Sure.
So every time I speak to professors, they say, it's not just about memorization, it's more about strategy. And we want to hear your critical thinking. So that's what my focus has been on.
Okay, great.
I like that. That's good.
Great, that sounds great. And Flora, how are you doing?
Well, I went through a little bit with Dr. Perry some time ago, but I have so many electives that's like there's a whole ton to study. That is the only one is like how the combination is, which one goes with which one. It's going to be where the challenge is. But otherwise, it's like getting down to doing the actual study and working smart. That's the main thing. I think it's not just working hard. It's just working smart and to know how it. There is plans in the mind, just getting to do it.
Yeah, right. It's taking it out of your head and doing it. I know. Have you all been able to find out for your electives what potentially the combinations of the classes that you're going to get tested on. So outside of your core classes, do you know what electives you're going to get tested on? Have you gotten that information yet?
I got an email back from, it was either Brown or Perry today, because I emailed them again. And they say they meet Wednesday morning.
Okay.
This Wednesday?
Yeah.
This Wednesday. So
I'm going to be in their office
good. Wednesday afternoon, you'd be like, okay, I know y'all met.
Good.
Hopefully by the end of this week,
you should have it.
They'll start giving us some stuff, because I've heard that they have in the past waited to 2 or 3 weeks out, which that would be very stressful, not knowing what you're being tested on.
Yeah, they can do that. I know for me, it was about 4 weeks. So up until this point, I was studying everything. And then I was able to get actual clarification, which helped me narrow it down. Now, the benefit is you kind of know what classes you don't have to worry about. But the negative part of it is you really don't know. Like, for example, I was tested on organizational communication and leadership. That was my combined question. I took crisis communication, though, as an elective, and one of my colleagues got organizational communication and crisis. We all took the same class, the same 3 classes. So they divided it up. So for me, when I got that question, I wasn't sure. Am I going to get mostly org comm? Am I going to get mostly leadership? Am I going to get a combination? And it turned out that I got mostly org comm, very little leadership. But there was enough in it that I had to cover it. So sometimes it's hard when you go in there, you have to make sure that you could address a question that is leadership focused with an emphasis on organizational communication, or organizational communication focused with a little bit of leadership. They kind of change it up on you. So once you know what they're going to test you as far as those electives, that should help clear up some of the confusion. And I know for me, once I knew I wasn't going to be tested on crisis communication, I put crisis on the back burner. I made sure that I still reviewed it a little bit so that I was familiar with some theories and things like that. But I didn't spend as much time on that one, because I knew they're not going to give me a whole question devoted to that elective. They're going to give me so I focused on what I thought the question was going to be on. That was very helpful to me. So now that I kind of have a feel for where you guys are at, let me just share with you a little bit about what I did. And I know we're down to the wire here. So I totally understand with you, Christy, how you feel, because that's exactly how I felt. I spent 16 weeks studying for my exams. I was in class at the same time. So I was doing theology of communication, and I was TAing for history of communication when I started my prep. The semester that I took my actual exams, I was doing a dissertation research class. So I was actually in school, but I had, satisfied all the requirements to be able to actually test. Needless to say, I was very busy. And then I was teaching, and of course, family and everything else. So for a lot of that beginning part, those first 8 weeks, I felt like I was making no headway whatsoever. I was reaching for books, trying to review them, reading other people's notes. I couldn't even look at the questions, other people's questions, because that overwhelmed me. It made me break down and cry, because I thought, I can't answer this question. I've been in school for 3.5 years, and I don't know how to answer this question. I have no knowledge. It was very, very frustrating. At about the 8-week mark, though, I felt like things were starting to come together, and I felt a little more comfortable, at least in the courses and what the emphasis was on the courses. The big turning point for me was right now, 6 weeks out. That is when things started to fall into place. I devoted all of my time during the last 6 weeks to prepare. And I had pretty much gone from big jumbo binders of information down to maybe 5 pages at the most. I basically went through each one of my classes, and I created a bullet point list from top to bottom of everything. And I put down, you know, all the authors, what their main points were. But I realized that I wasn't going to be able to remember everything. I just wasn't. So I wanted to make sure I had all the key little takeaway points on the course materials, because that was really important. I wanted to make sure that at least I could speak to the authors, to what their big points were. I didn't really worry too much about quoting directly. Some people like to memorize quotations. My memory is terrible. So I knew that if I tried to memorize a quotation and then had to write it, I'd mess it up. So instead, I memorized content, let's put it that way, where I could say, Lewis says this, and then I paraphrased it, right? I knew what I wanted to say, but I didn't worry about trying to get his words, because I knew I would mess his words up. But if I could say what he said in my own words, I could attribute the quote to Lewis. And that's what I did. That worked real well for me. The other thing that I did is I drilled very, very hard on theory. So my two weakest classes I felt going in were history of communication and theory of communication. And predominantly that's because I'm an English person, not a communications person. So I never studied communication at the master's level. I studied it only at the PhD level. So I had really no prior background in communication at all. So theory was very weird as an English person, right? We do literary criticism. We'll do theory, right? We do criticism. So it was very hard for me. And history of communication was very hard for me as well. A lot of the books that we read, I struggled with in class, really grasping. So I sort of focused on theory simply because I had heard through the grapevine that if you do not pass theory, you won't pass qualifications. Theory is like the cornerstone to the program. History is as well. You really, really need to be well-versed in those two courses. Theology is a big one as well. They expect you to pass those core ones. So so I ended up, once I kind of boiled my little study notes down to what I felt was, these are the biggies, and I felt confident that I could at least talk about those big things. Then I took time and I went and looked up outside sources. And so, for example, for history of communication, I actually got a book that was not required, was not part of our curriculum at all, but it often used in master program. It was actually the history of mass communication. And I pulled from that, very well-known author, and that helped me quite a bit. And for theology, I did the same thing. I went outside and I went to christianbook.com and I found some really well-known Christian authors and kind of books on the New York Times bestseller, and I bought those. I did not have time to read deeply, but I read enough because I felt like I wanted to be able to talk about what's happening currently in theology, in the church, right? So we move away from all these historic figures, and then we move in. Then I have to be able to relate that to what's actually happening out there in this grand conversation of theology and how we communicate our faith. I wanted to be able to say, these are some of the big players, both on the apologetic side as well as the preaching side. And this is what they're saying, or this is what they believe. It's very interesting that a lot of those big name pastors have written on the topic of communicating faith in sort of our era. So there's some good books out there. For some of my other classes, I simply looked up journal articles. I picked two. I like 2s or 3s. Those combinations work well for me. And it's like for family communication, I knew I was getting a family comm question. And so in addition to everything that I studied for family comm, I found some studies on family communication, and I did Google Scholar, and then I actually went into the library, and I picked things that I thought I could remember. So for example, I wrote on relationships between mothers and daughters. And I'm very interested in sort of how television portrays the relationship between mothers and daughters. And one of my favorite TV shows is Gilmore Girls. I love that show. And so I found a study actually looking at Gilmore Girls. And it was really interesting, fascinating little study. and for whatever reason, because it was something I knew, I was really familiar with that television show, the study stuck in my head. So when I was answering my question and I was, talking about some of the Seagren and Flora and the other writers, I was also able to bring in some current studies that explored, relationships between mothers and daughters. Another thing I was very interested in is sibling relationships. So I found a study that someone had done on, sisters and brothers and how they relate to one another. So I tried to have 2 different studies for each one of my classes that were relatively new, that I thought would be fresh. No one else would be talking about them, right? Because what my answer is not going to look like your answer. Your answer is just not going to look like someone else in your study group. And so you want to differentiate yourself. So I did that. The other thing that I did, sort of after I had collected some outside resources, then I actually tackled the questions. So I waited really late in the process to look at the questions. The positive of focusing on the questions for me was that I process information through writing. Some people process it up in their head. For me, I have to write. So I didn't do, some of my colleagues looked at the questions and they tried to write from memory. They wanted to approximate the testing situation. That didn't work for me, because when I sat down and looked at that question, I got blank. There was nothing coming out of my head. And I had been studying, it scared me. So what I did that worked really well for me is I took the question and I treated it as though it was an essay answer open book. And I sat down with a Word document and I outlined that question, and I used all my sources for history of comm, and I wrote an answer, direct quoting from the text, using my little outside sources, and I basically wrote it as if Dr. Keeler had said to me, here's what you need to write on, and it's open book. And for some reason, that process of writing, it was like light bulb went off in my head. And I did that for every single one of the classes, and it made such a difference. The negative of doing that is that when I actually sat down to take the test, it threw me off my game a little bit, because of course I had answered a question that didn't look like the question I actually got, so I had answered a question that someone else had gotten in a previous quals exam, and it was great and I loved it. It was a super question, but that wasn't the question I got. And that was a little kind of, I had to step back a little bit, but there was enough of what I had answered that was directly relatable. So it worked for me to be able to do that. I never really did the whole time yourself, see if you can write in 2 hours. I tend to be a very prolific writer. I can write really, really fast. And so I did not have any issues with running out of time during the testing. Some students said that they did. I actually quit. I actually finished with 15 minutes to spare, except for theory. Theory was the hardest one, because it's a lot.
A lot to write. Yeah,
it was a lot to write, because you have to, my question, I had to address every tradition, so 7 traditions, and I was asked to supply 2 theories for each tradition. And then at the end, I was asked to create a study using, focusing on one tradition, 2 theories, but 1 study. Dr. Goines had changed that up. And so that was that took more time. I spent too much time explaining the theories, so that when I got to the bottom and I had to develop that study, I had about a half an hour. And it took a half an hour for me to answer that last little part, and I pushed it right to the wall.
So now, tell me, what was she asked you to design something within the traditions and then end theories?
Yeah. So the
we were in that class together, I believe.
Did you take Dr. Goines?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you will get she'll write you this question.
Yeah.
Now every quals group, she is given the same question.
Okay.
So just keep that in mind. You may get the exact same question. or she may have been instructed to not do that anymore.
To make it easier.
Yeah, it's easier on her, right? And it's actually easier on us because we can study for it. The question that Dr. Goins asks, and she typically asks, is to explain. Let me see. You have to take your stance on Craig, right, and his traditions, right? She does not get into, is it a discipline or a field? She doesn't ask you that question at all. That was always a question Fraser liked to ask. So it was primarily to defend the traditions and then to discuss each tradition. So you have to be able to say what the name of it is, of course, what it is, right? What the actual tradition is, what the characteristics are of that tradition, and then give examples of the various theories in that tradition. Some of my colleagues memorized 3 theories for each tradition. I only did 2 because I knew 3 wasn't going to work for me. If I tried to memorize 3, I might only get 1. So I thought I can do 2. I think I could do 2. So I memorized 2 theories for each one. And pretty much it was just simply saying one of the first traditions is rhetoric, right? Blah, 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 blah. This is the history of it. The rhetorical tradition, this is the history of it. This is what it means. And 2 great examples of this tradition are, and then I had picked 2 that were very easy for me as an English instructor. I used Toulmin's framework, which I know really well. And I did linguistic relativity, which is another one that it was just really easy for me to remember. And then in addition to that, I gave a practical experience. So I gave 2 examples. Here's the tradition. Here's the authors of the tradition. This is what the tradition is, or the theory is. And then I said a practical example. And I was able to use it very easily because I teach writing and argument. I talked about how I teach the Toulmin framework, the strengths and weaknesses of it. And then I talked about linguistic relativity and how important that is in an English class when I have international students who are in my class with me. It's one of the issues that they struggle with. They think in their native language, but they have to write in English. And there's this problem between the community to be able to communicate and articulate. And it's a challenge because it's culturally based. So they don't want to argue, maybe because they're a culture of relationship. It's very difficult for them. So that was an example I used. It was easy for me to remember. After I got down to the bottom traditions, all 7 of them, the question she asked was, if you had to design a study that uses sociocultural tradition, she gave me the tradition. Okay. Come up with a study that uses 2 different theories. And she didn't tell me anything. She just told me the tradition. So I had to think, okay, real quick, boom, back of my head, I got to have 2 theories in sociocultural, and what would be a study I could do. Now, she wasn't looking for in-depth, but what she was looking for was, and in fact, I think I did the study. Which did I do? Oh, I did invitational rhetoric. That was one of mine because she gave me the critical tradition. I'm sorry, the critical tradition. She gave that to me. I did invitational rhetoric, and I designed a study for use in a composition classroom. And I just said, gave personal experience why I would do it, because I know that my students struggle. They don't like to argue. They're very concerned about offending. And so the invitational rhetoric is a great theory that is very conversational-like. And it's all about dialoguing and not arguing and whatever. She liked it. She really liked my proposed study. So I would say that in all, once I got to about 2 weeks out, I pretty much was down to every single night reviewing my little 5-pager cheat sheety thingy that I had. And I would read through that and review it. I review my flashcards, and then I would read my answers that I had written out. So I had written those essays, and I printed those out, and so I had a little packet. So I had my 5-page cheat sheet, and then my little essay answer, and I reviewed those every single night. And sometimes during the middle of the day if I had time, but often during the day I would simply kind of talk to myself, like driving to school. I would talk about theory, I would talk about history, and sort of just converse. And so it did come together the closer I got. Truthfully, while I was overwhelmed and felt like I didn't really know what I was doing, by the time I got within 2 weeks, I felt far more confident that I could go in and I could give it my best shot. That was really the key, right? And then as far as my actual experience for qualification for the exams, I did my test proctored. So I tested out here in Arizona, and my chair of my department was the one who proctored my exam for me. Super great guy. And the process was very, very smooth. He was really organized, which was wonderful. And I actually sat in the office right across from his. So I was able to, I went in and had a computer there. I took the required materials. You know, I had some paper, and I had my Bible. I was allowed to bring my Bible. I didn't bring a dictionary. Didn't need it. I had a pen and a pencil, and I had highlighters, just a few things that I brought with me. Water I brought in. He didn't care if I had a snack. That wasn't big to him. So I had a little igloo-y thing that I brought in and sat on the floor. I didn't have time to do snacks. Some people said, oh, you know, you can have a little health bar or whatever. I didn't have time. Once it started, it was like, boom, I needed all my time. So he gave me my questions. He had received them. He printed them out for me. He did not give them to me electronically. Some people actually received an electronic version where they could type right into Word. I actually got a paper copy. I preferred the paper copy. That worked really well for me. And so what I did is once he said go, right, and he timed me, he said to start, you get 2 questions. I had 2, and I looked at them, and I decided which one I wanted to do first. I picked the one I felt I was strongest in, because I thought I can get it done, probably get it done faster than the other one. And then I looked at the question, and first thing, I took my highlighter and I highlighted the key parts of that question. So I went in and if it had 5 different parts to it, I numbered them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I highlighted the key words so I really understood the question. I think a lot of students don't do well because they don't take time to read the question and they don't understand what's being asked of them. So I made sure that I knew. And then on that question paper, because it was 8.5 by 11, then I made a little outline. And I did not really practice the mind dumping or whatever, the brain dump thingy. I kind of did, but not the way, I didn't dump out an outline. I simply dumped out bullet points or key points. And again, it's just because my brain, I'm a mind mapper, and I'm like sticky note type person, bubble things. I just don't do real straightforward outlines. So I put down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If there were 5 parts to that question, I numbered them on my paper. And then I took whatever information I had in my little brain and I stuck it in point 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if it was a book, Augustine, and I wanted to talk about Augustine first, he went in number 1. And then number 2, maybe it was Lewis. And number 3 was Chesterton. Whatever it was, however it matched the part of the question, I stuck my author, textbook author in there. If it was an example from one of the books, like a scenario, you know, like Flannery O'Connor, and it was some scenario, I just wrote a couple words, Connery, blah, 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 boom. And so I kind of made myself a little outline until I had enough information for each one of those points. And then I just opened up Word. I didn't bother to copy the question over. I just kept that in front of me. And I really just wrote an essay. So I wrote an introduction, right? I did your standard 5-paragraph essay, right? Introduction, conclusion, and then my body paragraphs were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If there were 7 points, it was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But I made sure that I did a good introduction and a good conclusion. And in my introduction, I just followed the basic proper technique of always restating the question in your introduction, right? Giving a purpose statement. I included a purpose statement in my introduction. I intend to discuss the following points, boom, 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 using various sources, course textbooks, whatever. I was very organized and analytical. And then I just simply wrote. And I wrote and made sure that every single paragraph addressed key point, concluded with a nice strong summary. And if I was lucky, and I was, except for theology, I had somewhere in that 12 to 15 minute range, which allowed me to run spell check. So I ran spell check and I proofed. I tried to find as many grammar errors, typos. They don't grade you on that kind of stuff, but I just wanted to be sure that I was turning in something that was fairly decent. Mm-hmm. So when the 2-hour mark ended, my chair did not come in and say, okay, go to question 2. They just give you 4 hours. So I just then, took the second question, did the same thing, and then started the process again. At the noon mark, I then went out and told him, okay, I'm done. And we had worked out a little process where I emailed him my answers. He then emailed those answers on to Ray. And then he also printed my answers because you got to have a paper copy that he signs. So we did all of that. I went to lunch, came back, repeated the process that Thursday afternoon. And then Friday morning, Friday afternoon, we did the exact same thing. Now for Friday afternoon, I had a Federal Express envelope. I chose to send my answers Federal Express. And so I got the whatever, maybe it was Express, whatever is the cheaper one. But, the overnight thing, not the overnight, the 2-day thingy, anyways, from the postal. And I had all the information printed out. I had the label, the whole thing. And when my chair was done, he had signed my answers. He had done everything that Ray asked him. He gave those to me. We put them in the Federal Express little envelope. We sealed it up. And I actually took it to it wasn't Federal Express, I remember, because I took it to the post office. I took it to the post office and I dropped it in the box. I did not want him to have that responsibility to mail my answers back to Regent. I took care of that myself. And then he also made sure that everything had been emailed, so she got that. And then I had a little flash drive with me. And so I had copies of all my answers to take home with me. And so that was the whole quals, the written part of it. And then the 2 weeks in between, really all I did was I read my answers and cried. And I cried a lot because I thought I absolutely did terrible. The worst thing I could have ever done. It was awful. Worst experience of my life. The good news is after about 4 days, and I stopped crying, I realized that my answers weren't really that bad. They were actually pretty good. But, it's a whole emotional thing that happens. And then I really just looked at my answers as an objective observer. And I basically said, Carol, did you answer the question? What part of the question did you not answer? Did you make any mistakes? And I highlighted in my answers where I felt like I just totally blew it. And I said the wrong author, or I wasn't very clear. And I fixed all of that. And I wrote little notes to myself for orals so that I felt like if they're going to catch me on anything, I wanted to be able to go into orals and say to them, you are right. And in fact, they did. Dr. Goins said to me, Carol, you forgot a theory. It looks like you started it, but you didn't finish it. She was right. I totally was panicked on time. And I had one example done. And the second one, I forgot. I started it and something distracted me. And when I came back, I never checked it. And of course I had run out of time. So I couldn't. But I had caught that. And so I simply said to her, you know what, Dr. Goins, you are right. And I kind of laughed and I just said, I ran out of time. I started it. I got distracted. I just went on and I totally forgot to go back. And I said, so let me tell you what I was going to say. And I did. And I just told her what I had left out. She was very satisfied with it. It was not an issue. I had made a mistake on historical critical. I had interpreted an example, one of the stories incorrectly. Dr. Graves totally grilled me on it. And I was very humble. He was right. He was absolutely right. You don't ever argue with the professors. They're always right. And you don't argue with them, right? Because you want to pass, right? So that's the thing. You go in, you're very humble, and you don't be strong, right? You defend your answers. But if they say you are wrong because you made a mistake, you simply have to say, oh my goodness, I didn't know that. I am so sorry. Thank you for clarifying. You just have to really do that, because you want to show that, we're all fallible. We all make mistakes. So in orals, because I know we're probably running out of time here, in orals, the process was really great. I had a great orals experience. I felt very, very confident by the time I got there that the errors that I had made, they were tiny. They were very, very small. They were nothing major. I think I wrote in total something like 75 pages in the 2 days of testing. Yeah. So just FYI, guys, they will not pass you if you write 2 pages. You should be able to write somewhere in the range of about 5 pages, single spaced. It's a lot. So just know that if you're thinking, oh, this is like a two page, boom, and I'm out, you will not pass. They're not looking for you to regurgitate everything, but they are looking for analysis and critical thinking and your ability to synthesize all those texts, make it practical, apply it to the field of communication. I mean, that's what they're looking for. So think that you're writing kind of like a mini little paper. Each one of those is a mini paper, and you want to make sure you're well covered. So I had written, I think my shortest one was about 4 pages. My longest was 6. Those were all single spaced. Some of the questions, of course, had studies in them or things that were bullet point, like big outlines were attached. So sometimes you'll get to 6 pages and it's not all paragraphs. 3/4 of it is paragraphs, and then the bottom portion is a nice big long list. But when I went into orals, I was very confident that I hadn't really goofed. If I had done anything at all, I might have been a little light in a couple areas. I might have not known as much detail as I probably should have, but I was not wrong in my interpretation. I just didn't give enough example, perhaps. So in that 2-week period, I was able to go back and add some more, right? One of the other things I did, I reread those articles that I had used as outside sources, because let me tell you, if you do that and you include outside journal articles or books or whatever it may be, you have such a strong point of argument, because I will tell you, more than likely, the professor has not read those journal articles, and they probably haven't read the books you picked. So it's very hard for them to argue something that they don't know about. And that's what I did. So when I was being tested orally and they questioned something, I simply brought up the study. And I'd say, well, I talked about this study that so-and-so and so-and-so did. It's really fascinating. It's where they looked at sibling relationships. I thought it was really interesting in what they found. Boom, boom. I told them what they found, what were the results. And honestly, they looked at me and they said, wow, that's really interesting, Carol. They hadn't read the study, but the study related to what I was saying, and I used it as a point of defense. I did that with theology with Dr. Frazier. I had used a book by Timothy Keller called Preaching, and it deals with preaching in a postmodern world. And he's a big fan of Dr. Keller, did not know that. He hadn't read the book. And so he said to me, he goes, I've been wanting to read this book. And I said, great book, Dr. Frazier, you should read it. It's really, really fascinating. It challenged a lot of my thinking. And I tied it directly into the question he was asking me in orals. And it took our conversation in a different direction. So the key is for orals, if you write really strong written answers, you covered all the bases, you gave good answers, you have great examples, You used your evidence well. You presented a nice, strong argument, just like we all should be able to do at this level. They're not going to have a whole lot to pick apart. And what I found is the students who did not do that tended to get grilled, and it was really uncomfortable. But if you've written pretty solid answers, they might question you on 1 or 2 points, and really you just elaborate. You just, sometimes they ask me to clarify. They said, can you clarify what you meant here? I'm not really sure I understood it. And I'm like, sure, this is what I meant. And I admitted, I said, yeah, well, I was probably in a rush and I wasn't as clear as I could be. So let me explain it to you. And I explained it, and they were like, great, that makes sense. Thank you very much. Sometimes they threw questions at me that were really far afield, things that I would not even be able to answer, and they do that on purpose. Dr. Keeler asked me if I had an opportunity to talk with Neil Post, who do you say? He had me, Marshall McLuhan, Neil Postman, and Walter Ong about media ecology and their feelings now that we are in the 21st century. Something about what would I say, or what did I think they would say? It was something like that, so hypothetical that it was next to impossible to answer. And I just simply said, well, it's a good thing that 2 of the authors are dead, because they could not answer that question. You know, I mean, it's true. You know, I don't know. I mean, Marshall McLuhan, hello. You know, I don't know what he would think about all the technology, right? Walter Ong, I don't know what Walter Ong would think about the heavy use of social media right now. So, but I had to come up with an answer. So I had to just throw it out there and go with what I knew, and they were satisfied, which was good, but it was very hard. It was very, very hard to think on my feet. And sometimes they do that, especially if your answers are really strong and they don't feel like they can find fault with you. They try and test you on your field knowledge, practical knowledge. So if you were at a conference and, you know, Clifford Gertz came up to you and wanted to talk to you about this, what would you say? And you're like, I'd probably run in the bathroom. You know, I don't know. I wouldn't want to talk to Quentin Schultz. You know, I want to stay away from, I don't want him to ask me any questions. You know, you have to be able to think on your feet and act like, you know, you're halfway intelligent. So the orals process for me was really, I don't want to say it was fun. Amanda Jo described her experience as fun, but I would say it was a little scary. I was very apprehensive and I was nervous, but they were very gracious to me. They were all very, very gracious. They were very kind. And we did laugh a lot, which is a positive. If they laugh, that's always a good sign. They also talked amongst themselves and they joked with one another, which is also another really good sign. But there were a couple times when I felt like I was under the microscope and they knew it was a weak area for me. So I just chose the humble route. If I didn't really know the answer, I always complimented them. That's always important. I said, that is an excellent question. I did what you do, like in interviews, right? Those horrible behavioral interviews. Thank you very much for asking that question. It's really interesting. I've never thought of it in that way, but if I had to answer, this is what I would say. Or sometimes I said, that's really, really interesting. I've never thought about that. Could you elaborate on that a little bit more to help me to understand what you're hoping to get? And in doing that, I was very honest. You've asked me something that's a little bit out on the fringe. I'll do my best to try and answer it. They were very gracious as far as that's concerned. And I gave my best defense. And for the most part, they said, okay, thank you very much, Carol, and moved on. So, so in all, it was enjoyable. I left when they asked me to step out. I had no confidence that I had passed. I didn't have I didn't think I had failed, but I honestly didn't know. I just felt good that I had done the very best, to the best of my ability. I was honorable. I answered the questions. I was polite, courteous, very considerate of their time. And then I really knew, you know, it's in the Lord's hands. If the Lord wanted me to pass and he had brought me this far, he was going to see to it that I passed. And I did. So when they called me in and told me that I had passed, it was a relief. You know, I was just so relieved just to get have this stress over, you know. But that was kind of my experience and sort of what I did. I did things differently than my peers, but I did what worked best for me. I think differently. My brain works differently. Maybe it's because I'm an English person versus, you know, I don't do public speaking. I tend to be a bit more of a thinker. Reflect. I like to reflect a lot. I do. You know, I mean, not to say that my colleagues don't think. I just mean I tend to reflect a lot. I think a lot, and just in my head. And so I did what worked best for me, and I was really, really blessed to have passed. So that's it, guys. That was my experience.
That's awesome. There was lots of good stuff. I took lots of notes to be able to incorporate.
Can you tell me the book that you referred to for the theology question again?
Yeah, I actually read 2 books. Let me see if I can find them for you. They should be right here. I don't know where I moved them. The first one is Preaching. It's by Timothy Keller. And it's on the New York Times bestseller. It's a really nice little book. It doesn't come in paperback, unfortunately. It comes in hardback. And it's about $20, maybe $22. It's called Preaching in an Age of Postmodernism. In an Age of Postmodern Skepticism. I think that's what it's called. But you can find it if you go to Christian Book or Amazon. It's Timothy Keller. The other one I read, and I didn't get as deep into it, but it was by N.T. Wright, and it was on Surprise. Hang on a second. Let me look at my other bookshelf.
Okay. You woke the cat up. Hello, Mary.
Yeah, that's this
one. Hello, Mr. John. How you doing?
Oh, I'm doing good.
Oh, there you go. All right. Okay, sorry. So the Keller book is actually Communicating Faith. That's it. Communicating Faith in an Age of Skepticism. Great book. Super, super great. And then the other one by N.T. Wright is called Surprised by Hope. And it's Rethinking Heaven, the Resurrection, and the Mission of the Church. Dr. Fraser had focused so heavily on apologetics in that class. And so I went, let's just say I went for the throat because I don't like Kierkegaard, which I knew, you know, he loves Kierkegaard. And I don't like him. And I don't understand him half the time. So I really wanted to stay away. But I am really, really familiar with modern apologetics. I enjoy Ravi Zacharias. I enjoy William Lane Craig, some of the other really big, Joshua Dow, the big apologists. I've read a lot of those works, so I was very familiar with current trends in arguing. And in fact, when I did my history of communication paper, I focused on Gregory Banson, right, who was died tragically in 1995. But one of the foremost apologists early on in the 1990s, and he argued against atheism, and his whole argument was based in reason. And so that kind of approach, using logic, reason, factual evidence, that's very common today. That's what we're doing. And of course, what's his face's book in that refutes that. Penner, right? Penner doesn't want us to focus on that. So that's what I used sort of to stage my defense in that I believe that there's value in both methods. I think we need both to deal with the science as well as the faith conversation aspect. So that's what I did. Those were my 2 books, though. They're good books. Definitely recommend Keller. Keller's just interesting to read.
So that's Keller.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I have a logistical question because I'm going to end up having to have the written portions proctored. How do you go about like getting that approved? You know, do you remember what the phases are with that?
Yep. So if you need a proctor, you really have two choices. So you can use a testing center, right? And there are a number of testing centers that are available. ETS, you know, the people that do the GRE and the big tests, a lot of times they will do proctoring. You can check in your area if they will proctor for doctoral exams. Those are nice because it's a very controlled environment. The only downside of a testing center is you want to make sure that they have rooms. Some testing centers, all the students are in a big room with little cubicles, and others actually have closed rooms, right? And truthfully, for your exams, you want to be in a closed environment. You need to be in a room where the door's closed and it's just you and the computer, and you're not going to hear students asking the librarian or the testing administrator, you know, oh, you know, the computer locked up. You don't want to be disrupted. So you can use a testing center that's near you. That's one option. The other option is you can, if you work at a college or university, you can ask the testing administrator, excuse me, at your college or university if they will proctor you. A lot of times they will. In my case, I asked the chair of my department at Arizona Christian University if he would serve in that capacity, and he was happy to do that. You know, based on his schedule, that was the most important thing. You got to make sure that, you know, it's not going to conflict. So once I sort of knew what I wanted to do, I let Ray know that I was going to proctor. And then I had to get permission because I didn't use a testing center. So I sent an email to Dr. Brown, and I said, Dr. Brown, I would like to have Dr. Paul Kriesman be my proctor at Arizona Christian. And Dr. Brown approved him. There are certain qualifications for the proctor. The proctor has to hold a PhD or an ed, right? They have to have a doctorate degree. That's very important. They usually send their CV to Ray, and Dr. Perry or Dr. Brown or whomever now, I don't know, approves their qualifications. In the case of a testing center, the person that's actually doing the proctor may not have a PhD, but the testing center director often does. So you can be proctored by whoever is on, you know, working that day. They might have a master's degree, but the director of the testing center is the person who basically is overseeing. And the testing center has a lot of checks and balances, which is, I think, is why Regent prefers a testing center. But once you get approval from Dr. Brown or Dr. Perry, then really you're set to go. You do need to talk with your proctor, and you need to make sure of the arrangements. So in my case, I met with Dr. Kriesman, I guess a couple of weeks before my exams. He wanted me to come over. I wasn't teaching that semester, so he said, come on over, Carol, and let me show you where I think I'm going to put you. And I said, okay. So he showed me the room across the hall. He was very gracious. They cleaned it out. It was a storage room, but there was a desk in there and a chair. Now they did not have a computer for me to use, so I had to get permission to use my laptop from Dr. Brown. But my laptop is not my primary computer, meaning that I only used my laptop whenever I traveled to Regent or when I traveled for business. It was not my main computer where I would have had all my study materials and things on it. I had to explain that to Dr. Brown, that my laptop pretty much has an empty hard drive, right? Has Word and all of that print capabilities, but it really doesn't have any data on it. And he approved for me to be able to use my laptop. And then I asked my chair if they would provide a monitor for me, because I don't like to type on my keyboard. And they said they would provide a monitor and a keyboard and a mouse. So I really just had to show up with my laptop, and then we hooked it all up, made sure it worked before we actually started the session. But you want to make sure that where the room's located at, you want to make sure where the bathrooms are located at. if you're going to use a testing center, it's really, really important that you know their hours. Some testing centers close early on Fridays. They close at 4:30 or they close right at 5. And you need to make sure that they're going to be okay staying until 5:30 because you're going to finish at 5, but they have to do all that little work to get your stuff wrapped up. Someone has to be there. And you can't come early and start early and leave early. It has to, you start at 8 o'clock, you finish at 5. Those are the parameters set by Regent. And so you need to make sure your testing center, or if you're doing with an individual at a school, that they're going to be there. Someone will be there the whole time. Now, in my case, my chair, I also had to get permission from Dr. Brown because Dr. Kreisman teaches in addition to being chair of the department. So he had said to me, please get permission because on Thursday in the morning for an hour, I have to be across the quad in a class. And then in the afternoon for an hour, I have to be across the quad in a class. But Friday, I will be in my office. So Dr. Brown gave permission because Dr. Kreisman would be on campus and he would start me and stop me at lunch, and then start me and stop me in the afternoon. And it was just a very short amount of time that he was going to be in class. But the office area where I was located at was locked. So not that, I mean, I could get out, but no one was going to come in. When he goes out to teach, he locks the hallway, basically. It's a little building. His office is locked. The hallway is locked. So I pretty much was in there by myself. No one would come in. No students would wander in looking for him and knock on my door or anything like that. So there were just some weird little things that you just have to clarify so that you know. And I would say the big thing is you want to make sure you're comfortable, right? The testing center or the proctor or wherever you're doing it at, they really don't care about your comfortability. They're there to proctor students, and a lot of times they have 25 students that come through in a day, and they don't really care about you. So it's really important that you do the legwork. Make sure you're happy with the environment, you're happy with the accommodations as far as the desk, the computer, the monitor, all of that, because making you comfortable in the room is 90% of the battle. Truthfully, if you have to deal with an uncomfortable chair or the desk is funky or there's all this distraction, it's gonna affect your performance. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you're really happy. And if you have to visit 2 test centers or 3 test centers, do it. Look at the ones that are available in your area. Go visit them. Check them out. See which ones you like. Make sure you like the people. Are they friendly? Did they treat you nice? Just things like that.
Okay, good. I've been sort of discussing with Lee University about going and proctoring there, like where Jeff Salyer is. So I just didn't know how I needed to go about the process. So thank you.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Anybody have any other questions for me? I know I've eaten into kind of your Mary time. She's there. Look at her. She's working so hard on her dissertation. She is. She's a miracle woman. She is, that woman.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time. This was definitely helpful for me because, I just.
For me too. I like the idea of reading. That's what I've been doing for the history. I found a couple articles and I've been reading them. Mm-hmm. And I'm thinking, this is good stuff. And something I can bring into. This is what's happening. This is what's happened in the past. This is happening now.
Right.
So I think that's good advice. Just find 2 articles for each test, and stick it in your brain.
Yeah, exactly. And something that, just as I exit out here, keep in mind that when you are answering, let's say, theology, you may pull in information from history. Right? Things that, as you're writing your answer, something's going to pop in your head that you read about, studied about, that dealt with history. In fact, the journal articles, I found a couple, they actually applied to like 2 or 3 of my classes. Now, I wrote on it, I'm going to use this for family comm, right? Or I'm going to use this for org comm. I ended up referencing it in 2 different questions, right? And then even in orals, I referenced something that I had used for a different class, historical critical, but the conversation led that way, and I brought it back up again. So you want to be able to do that. Just know that you'll pull in from your other classes and you'll bring information. And then also, for those of you that are educators, draw from your classroom experience. I teach freshmen. I mean, occasionally I get to teach juniors and seniors, hooray, but usually my classes are freshmen. I have so much practical experience in things that deal with communicating or deal with technology. Like I ask my students all the time about social media. How do they think does social media affect their ability to communicate in relationship, right? I ask questions like that. We do pop quizzes, we do surveys, we do things in class. That's all practical, but it demonstrates how I use communication in the classroom. And I'm not teaching communication classes, I'm teaching English classes. So if you're an educator, bring in some of those class experiences. It can be really strong. And then the other thing is if you work in business and you work with marketing or sales or you're a media person, bring in those experiences as well. Anything that you can use and say, hey, I experienced this, right, on a daily basis, or I had a client that did this. All of that is really pertinent.
Thank you.
All right. I'm going to leave you guys because otherwise I'll just keep going. And I know you've got other stuff you need to do.
Good stuff, though. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
You are welcome. If any of you guys need any help, reach out to me. I'll try to have a little bit of time while I'm struggling with grammar right now.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Carol.
All right.
Thank you, Carol.
See y'all. Bye.
See ya.
That was good. Good stuff.
So where is everybody in the process? Where are you as far as your ability to assimilate information?
For me, I think it depends on which class we're talking about. Like, okay. I definitely feel confident pulling in authors from theology and history, and then theory ideas.
Okay.
But then going into like philosophy, not so much. And I honestly haven't really sat down and really dug into media in the church or OrgComm yet. Mm-hmm. Those are sort of dangling. But for me, I guess because indirect comm reflects theology and comm a lot, has a lot of the same authors and ideas. So I had that benefit. And then philosophy sort of does too. And then history even, they all sort of bring in the same things. So like what I've been doing is like she was talking and it reminded me of something that I looked at a paper and I was like, oh, I can use this in theory and I can use it in media in the church and I can use it in theology and I can use it in advanced comm. And so I wrote that theory out and I was like, and I connect it to a paper that I wrote on Andy Stanley, who utilizes invitational rhetoric. So that was one of those things where I was like, yes. And it just reminded me that I need to go back and look at all my papers I've written, So yeah, so I guess for me, it just depends on the class.
Okay, John, what about you?
Oh, I'm just sucking it all in, you bet.
No, I'm not asking if you're sucking it in. I am asking hardcore, are you able to integrate the material? Are you having any issues?
Well, I've been studying the theology and history in the last couple of weeks. So, yeah, and you're right. A lot of them are the same. You can cross all the crossover and within the authors and how you answer the questions.
Okay, good. Flora, what about you? How are you at integration?
I mean, I get to see that there's connection between different subjects and how you can use one book for maybe some of them 2 or 3 courses and just make it work. You have to make it work somehow.
Okay, you have to make it work somehow is a very vague statement. I'm being a little difficult here for a reason. There are 5.5 weeks left until you take these exams. You need to be able to integrate these concepts at this point. And if you're having problems, I'm here to help you. However, if you're not taking it seriously, you will fail. You may not fail the whole test, but you will fail components of it. So that's why I am jumping in at this point to see where you are in the process and how you're doing. Okay, let's test it a little, okay? Can you give me a historical and a current example of media ecology?
A historical one?
A historical and a current example of media ecology.
Well, I guess like Walter Ong would talk about how when literacy came in, we went from talking to one another and being very communal to being very separated from one another and set apart and having more autonomy because of the flattening aspect that happened through literacy. And then like a modern example, I mean, you could talk, I don't know. Is that right? I don't know.
Marshall McLuhan would be modern media ecology.
McLuhan?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so I mean, the medium is the message, definitely, and how we portray that through how we interact with those means. I don't know.
Okay, let me give you a really good example. First of all, media ecology is a theory. It's also a school of thought. So basically, how communication technology develops and how we use it impacts culture and vice versa. That's a really rough definition. But a great example, a modern example, is the mobile telephone. Okay? The mobile telephone, when it first came on into society, was just a telephone. It was a telephone that was mobile. Okay, look where it has come. The mobile phone changed society, and then society changed the mobile phone into what we now know as the smartphone.
Mm-hmm.
We no longer use our phone for just calling people like we did when cellular phones first came out. We now use them for entertainment. We watch Netflix, we play video games, we Facebook, we social media, Instagram, Pinterest, all that stuff. Okay? So basically, if you're looking at McLuhan where the medium is the message, the smartphone is both the medium and the message. Because the content, the conversations we speak over these telephones actually change, has the ability to change the way we live, the way society conducts business, the way we are at home, the way we are around our children. You know, now everybody sits around at night, everybody's got their own electronic device, their own electronic smartphone. Okay, so the medium has actually changed the message. The message changes how we conduct our lives, and the medium is the message as well.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
And
good stuff.
Does everybody get?
I'm going to use that.
Okay.
Actually, what I was thinking that where I was going to go and how things cross over. There was a guy, James Burke, and I forget the other guy's author, was talking about how in the early days of, in the Dark Ages, when the church had control of knowledge. The only people who could read were priests and monks, and they were the conduit when a ruler needed to know something. He had to go to the monk to read it to him. Where nowadays, of course, knowledge is so prevalent. But
Google.
We go, it's exactly right. We go to Google, and Google controls, let's face it, I'm not a conspiracy theorist or anything, but when you Google something, you get what they think they want you to see.
Mm-hmm.
Their logarithm is is, I'm not sure how apolitical it is or uncultural it is, but I mean, I go on my smartphone to Google a movie that I just watched, and when I do that, 3 things come up on my screen of what people are looking at. Well, how easy is it for me to then go, oh, gee, I don't want to look at the movie. I want to see what's going on in Charlottesville, Virginia. And I get their version of it.
Google is a great example of media ecology, John.
Yeah. So you see where I'm going with that, bringing the monks from 1100 into what Google's doing today.
Okay. So we have an example. Let's use your example, John. We have Google as an example of current day media ecology. What theory could we apply to that?
I don't know. Tell me. This isn't a test. Tell me.
Laura, what theory could we apply to this example?
I would still think of McLuhan. The medium is a message.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Okay. But what if we were to integrate advanced comm theory into this example? What theory or theories could we use?
Can you restate the example very briefly? I had to step away for just a second.
Google, Christy, the prevalence of Google, how it shaped the way we live. You know, Google has become part of our lexicon. It's in the dictionary. It's affected the culture. It affects the content of Google in what people want.
So, I mean, you could look at like an agenda setting theory, maybe something with spin. You could bring that in. You could talk about how there's so much fake news now, but yet people are utilizing Google as their source of news. And so you could then talk about Lippmann and the idea of like the metal cast idea that things are stereotyped so much through how we view things, that image that's in our mind that's being generated from spaces like Google. They're creating these images.
The pictures in our head.
Yeah, the pictures in our head from Lippmann. Yeah, and how he, and how that impacts just so much of how we interact with one another and communicate, our worldviews and everything, and it's filtered.
Bring in theology. I want somebody to bring in theology. How could you include a theology in this? Wow, it got quiet really fast.
Well, I think of the line from Kierkegaard where it says, there's already enough information about Jesus in the world. What is the real problem is that we're not loving each other. So
what about Bonhoeffer?
Work that in.
How would Bonhoeffer come in? I mean, Bonhoeffer is all about the community and that we need to be in fellowship with one another and worship together and live together. And you could almost talk about how that needs to happen in reaction to the kind of mediatization or our mediated culture, that it's almost like we need community more because we need to have that accountability within fellowship, that we have a stronger group of people around us that encourages us to go to each other and not just to those media formats, but yet to challenge each other with our beliefs, and to, like he talked about in his book, about that we need to confess to one another and hold each other accountable, and then we need to take communion together. And instead of always going to Google, because I know that I've had a question about God before and I've Googled it, but yet how can I test Google to be true? There's no conversation there. There's no questioning back and forth. So I either take it to be true or I take it to be false and I move on. But in community, we get to have that back and forth relationship, which is, what Christ wants from the body, is that community, that fellowship together, so that as iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. And that's important.
They tie that into media ecology. Flora, can you come up with another theologian that you can tie into media ecology into Google?
C.S. Lewis, maybe.
Okay. Talk to me about C.S. Lewis. How would you do that?
I think C.S. Lewis used radio at one point, to talk about, I forgot which book that was, but he tailored his message according to the audience and according to the media format. So that particular one where he was talking to the radio as a radio broadcast, he deliberately told it as a story format. And short stories that people could understand. And he recognized that he was talking to a group of people that was not necessarily Christians.
Right.
That was a public radio, and he tailored it accordingly and told the story of Christ in a way that they could accept the message, and it worked for him and for the audience.
Okay.
So I think Google, this is a millennial age. It's not just talking about the internet, it is Google, and Google has become an adjective for a lot of things. You don't say going to the internet, you say, I Google this, I Google that. It has totally changed and defined the lifestyle and the behavior of especially the millennial group, the digital age group.
Exactly. So how would you tie in, let's say, Peters? How can you bring Peters into this?
Well, Peters was all about, speaking into the air, and they compared the Socratic method with Jesus's method. And Jesus's method says that you speak that truth into the air, and then it will fall and land where it is, and then the seed will be produced, in whatever way it's produced. And so, I mean, that's sort of how it is with Google is, you have a lot of Christians who are really engaging with Google and putting YouTube videos out and stuff and putting God's truths out there. So they're speaking them into the air, and trusting the Holy Spirit to work through that. I don't know.
How can you, for those of you who took social media in the church, how could you tie in social media in the church to this, to media ecology and Google?
I didn't take that.
Social media in the church?
No, I didn't take it either.
Okay.
Knew better.
What other electives did you take? John, I know you took the C.S. Lewis Study Abroad program.
Yeah.
What do you have to say about that?
It was really fun. I want to do it again.
The fun part, right? Just the fun part only, right?
Believe me.
Well, I don't know. We'll see what they ask me about it. I mean, I have my experience, and I know I've studied C.S. Lewis a lot. I don't know what they're going to ask me.
Okay.
Whatever they can ask me, I will come up with something.
John, let's talk about true myth. What is true myth?
Myth is an idea, it's historical, cultural ideas that drift down through, first of all, through oral storytelling. And
okay, so what is true myth?
It starts the same way. But
true myth, C.S. Lewis called the Bible.
Yeah, well, that is true. Yeah, but he also said the myth. As an unbeliever, the Bible starts out as a myth. It becomes true as it trickles. He describes it as a stream trickling down out of a mountain, and how as it builds up momentum in your life, the Bible turns from a myth to truth, and it crosses an isthmus. That he actually uses that word. There's an isthmus that you cross over.
You would pick up myth. Boatman.
Pardon?
I said, you would pick up on that.
I would, yeah.
You would pick up on the word isthmus.
Yeah, I like that word.
I know you do.
So that's what, eventually, even for, I mean, there are things in most Christians' life that, in the modern age, some of it's hard to believe, but eventually those myths become truth in your life.
Okay. Let me talk to you just for a second, John. I love the fact that you are deep. I love the fact that you have a breadth of knowledge. You are great to talk to. I love our conversations. But when you get into this exam, you have 2 hours to answer this question. And if you can't talk about true myth in 2 sentences, you're going to have a problem. Mm-hmm. Okay? You have 2 hours. And I know that sounds like a lot of time. But when you get exam, it's not.
No.
Okay, so there's some pretty, C.S. Lewis is pretty thematic. Okay, there are some themes that run through it, like imagination, like transportation, like true myth. Okay, I would focus on the strong themes in the C.S. Lewis Study Abroad program. Focus on working on those themes and knowing those themes inside and out. Because I'll be honest with you, when I was asked about C.S. Lewis in orals, I literally in one sentence said both of the words they were looking for. And they were looking for, I think it was imagination and something else. But indirect communication is another concept, as Christy would know, for C.S. Lewis. Go back to the syllabus, go back to the works and the notes that you took on the lectures, like in Oxford. Take a look at what those strong themes are that emerge in that class, because that's probably what you'll be tested on, okay? Flora, what electives do you have? What electives did you take?
Philosophy, peace journalism, global communication. And then I did, it's a 791, I built a curriculum on terrorism.
Okay. Global communication. You're going to want to talk to Andre about that. Andre Koch, do you know who he is?
Yeah, we met last year.
Yep.
He was in the same class. Same class for global com. Yeah.
And he failed it.
Yeah, something about the theory. Yeah.
So you need to talk to Andre and find out what exactly he did to pass the exam. Because the thing of it is, Perry is a different test giver. His expectations are a little different than the others that have been around for a while. So you are going to want to familiarize yourself with Andre's answer. You're going to want to talk to him about his experience, see what he has to say. Because global common philosophy are the 2 questions that he failed.
I thought only one.
Then came back and he redid them.
I thought only global com that he had to redo.
No, he had to redo 2.
Okay.
Okay. And so you're going to want to catch up with Andre Koch about that, because what happened was Dr. Perry had just started teaching those, and Andre was the first person to be tested by Perry.
Oh, okay.
So, and he thought he could let it go until the last minute, and ended up passing 6 of the 8 questions.
Okay.
I was there when it happened. I took exams 3 computers down from him. I was there when he didn't pass the orals. I actually took him out to dinner because it felt horrible. Andre's Harvard educated. He's brilliant.
Yeah, I remember that.
So catch up with Andre Koch this week and see what he has to say about global common philosophy. Okay. John, what other electives do you have other than C.S. Lewis?
Entertainment, education.
Oh, you've got EEs. So Albert Banduras.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's other than for that one, other than having to read up and get some quotes and some other things in my brain, I think I had that one down.
Is that being combined with another elective for you?
No.
Did you take OrgCom or did you take PR campaigns?
Nope.
Or
I only took two electives.
How'd you get away with just 2 electives?
I cheated.
Probably.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now my electives are entertainment, influence of entertainment, C.S. Lewis. Then I took the dissertation research and doctoral mentoring research and writing, which will be on modernism and postmodernism.
Okay, so your dissertation, let me talk to you a little bit about your electives. Your dissertation elective is they're going to go right to the heart of the matter. Alani had a dissertation question and it was, oh my gosh, forever long, just insanely long. Make sure you know the academic writing process. Review your academic writing notes. Did you take that with Perry, academic writing?
No.
You didn't?
Well, I took all those with Dr. Fraser. Philip Williams was along with us, so I've talked to him about it. He said the question basically is write about modernism and postmodernism.
But they are going to apply it to your dissertation topic.
They are. They don't even know what it is.
Well, they've probably checked and looked at papers that you've done and looked back in your files. They're probably talking to Dr. Fraser what your area of interest is.
I hope so.
And out of the picture just because he doesn't work at Regent anymore.
Look, I know. I mean, we had pretty much decided that I was going to do my dissertation on George MacDonald.
Okay, so you'll probably get tested on George MacDonald.
Good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
You better reference how C.S. Lewis said that he baptized his imagination.
Yep. That's right. Oh, that's the first quote.
Favorite sentences, Crystal.
That quote is written in my theology notebook with a highlighter and stars.
Yeah. Well, and to further that, Lewis said he never wrote anything without quoting or referencing George MacDonald. So there's, I mean, the whole idea of indirect communication, postmodernism, modernism. I think I could cover that fairly easily along with George MacDonald.
Okay, entertainment education. Chances are really high, and I say that in all seriousness, chances are really high that Dr. Brown has you do some type of a campaign.
Good, I could do that too.
Some type of a radio campaign in a third world country.
Oh, it's going to be TV. I'm a TV guy.
Some type of radio campaign in a third world country where you have to solve a cultural problem through entertainment education. And it'll probably be like a 13-week season or something like that. And you will literally have to write out 13 weeks of information. I will tell you the electives I really had fun with, because with the electives, you can use your imagination. The cores are more, there's more that isn't going to change. Yeah. You have to know what the 7 traditions are for comp theory. They aren't going to change. However, when you go to things like entertainment education, C.S. Lewis, church and the media, org-com, that type of thing, you can really enjoy it because you're allowed to use your creativity. You're allowed to say, okay, it's an org-com question. This is what I would do. This is why I would do it. This is how I would do it. Those questions are more creative, but I will tell you, Dr. Brown is really, lately, the last 3 or 4 years, has really gotten into doing a 12-week, 15-week training session or a campaign for a large church. That's typically what he does for those electives. Okay, so you're going to want to take a look at the questions that are in the Dropbox. I know you've gotten.
I've looked at a lot of those. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, take a look at those and see how people have answered the questions relating to. There's a couple of church ones in there, a couple of answers to church ones. Ramika Leary, I think, had to write a syllabus. Someone else had to write a book. So go in and make sure with your electives that you can do those 3 things. And make sure in doing so, for example, let's do an example. Let's write a book. Let's do something everybody's got. Let's write a book on, excuse my nose itches, on history of calm. Okay. So in coming up with the chapters for history of calm, what would be chapter number 1?
Okay, you say that one more time.
You had to write a book on the history of calm. What would chapter 1 be based on everything you've been studying?
Just oral narratives and oral history, cave art, the first writing style and cure forms.
I think I would make it like maybe 6 chapters, an introduction chapter, and then I would go through the 6 revolutions of Fang.
Okay.
So chapter 1 would be pre-literate to literate, and I would bring in Walter Ong and talk about, and I would just try to let that be like maybe my chapter maker, and bring in Marshall McLuhan's media map into that also and reflect it a little bit.
Okay. Think of writing a book or doing a syllabus or writing a proposal like you write an essay. You need to have a strong thesis statement for anything they give you. Any question they give you, you have to have a thesis for. So when we first started talking 2 months ago or 3 months ago, whenever it was, I had you guys dissect questions and come up with thesis statements and what are the key words. You're going to do the same thing. So for example, if you were given a question for history of calm to create a textbook, you are going to want to see what Keeler wants in that textbook. Does he want current information as well as Fang? Does he want a section on media ecology, how to define it, examples of it? Okay, so your question is really going to be your best friend. It is the prompt to your essay, to your answer. That essay or that answer, I'm sorry, I apologize. That question contains everything you need to answer it. It's going to be very broad, but it will give you enough room where you can write week 1, introduction to the history of calm. Week 2, Fang. Week 3, and then you include Ong, you include Peters, you include all of those books as a separate chapter. And then you tie them together with your transition sentence in between each chapter. If you have to do something like that for entertainment education, John, you're going to do the same thing. Each book, each article is a chapter. You're going to tie it together with transitions, okay?
Sure.
So it's not just the history of calm that we're going to talk about with writing a book. If we were writing a book, we would also have to include, along with Peters, along with Ewan, along with all of them, you would also have to include some theory. So if you, let's stay with history of calm. If you took each of the books in history of calm, what theory could you apply to your discussion of those books?
I don't know. I haven't thought about a theory when it comes to history.
That's something to think about.
Why? They're not asking for a theory when
no,
for any
but
kind of
what
question.
I'm asking for, John, is that you are a well-rounded person who can have a scholarly discussion and apply it in real-life application. So, for example,
you can use narrative in just about every subject. So if you want to bring in a narrative, bring in Fisher.
To bring it in.
Yeah.
So if you are discussing mass media, you could do something like audience effects. You could do symbolic interactionism. Okay. So you need to start thinking about things like this. How do I incorporate other classes along with the outside sources along with personal relevant examples. Because all of these...
Yeah, well, that's something that the other John Powers and I were talking about. He was saying, bring in Fisher and write him into everything.
I brought Fisher in too.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, you're right. And, you know, I think I could, I mean, when they're asking for, I mean, some of the questions about the history, let's see, what do I have in here? Let's see. I have an example of Keeler's question here. How many believe that the digital communication technology?
Pardon me? Google and talk about, okay, how can we use social media to talk about Christ?
Sure.
Because social media has such an impact on our lives, like Google does. How can we use social media to communicate Christ to others? How can that social media, how is that part of history of Tom? Which of the revolutions is that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not going to have, I didn't take media ecology, but I mean, or the church.
Yep, you could bring in diffusion of innovation. Social media is an innovation. Look how fast it diffused through society. Okay, you could bring in entertainment education theories as well. So you've got to be able to cross-reference all of this stuff. And I know it's a lot. I really do. But now is the time where you put your nose to the grindstone, and for the next 5 weeks, you eat, sleep, breathe, think, only quals. Because it's almost over. You can do it. You just have to buckle down at this point.
Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Yep.
You're going to appreciate it afterwards. Trust me.
Okay, can I clarify again?
Yes.
The 730, you said that we have to know the publishing process. Is that what you mentioned just now? Writing and publishing.
If you're being tested on your dissertation, a lot of times they want to know if you are publishing a paper related to your dissertation, what is the process you would go through? So they can ask you about it.
So you're saying that if I have done the dissertation proposal, they will want to know what you just did, publishing a...
They may.
Okay.
Will, but they may. Other people have been asked what the process is to have a paper related to their dissertation published.
Okay, so I did my dissertation proposal, so that's a possibility that I may be asked.
You could be, yeah. Anything is fair game. They can ask you anything they want to.
But so is it from the point of view of content or the process?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Is it from the point of view of the content of your dissertation? Like if you can publish something on my topic is terrorism, then that, or just the process, the publication process?
No, they could ask you, okay, we understand that you're writing a dissertation or planning to write your dissertation on terrorism. Describe a second paper that would accompany this topic, or I can't think of the word. Describe a second paper that you could write on this topic. What it would be about, how you would get it published, and what journal you would publish it in. They could ask you that.
Okay.
Yeah, I've seen that in some of the sample questions.
Happened to me.
And then just now you said that if you have done a book proposal or textbook proposal, they could ask you something on that. I just finished one textbook proposal, actually.
They can ask you anything they want, but I will tell you this to give you a little hope. The more you write, the less they will ask you.
Okay.
So if you fill your holes going in, if you're able to integrate all of this stuff going in, there are people that have gone into orals late and come out early. And then there are other people who did not do as well on the writtens and did not put as much information on the writtens and ended up having a 3.5-hour oral exam.
Oh dear.
That would be horrible.
Yeah. So what I'm saying to all of you is now is the time. You have 5.5 weeks. At this point, You did fairly okay tonight, but at this point, you really need to be integrating all of the course material. It fits together. I literally could use any of my courses in any of the answers. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking for how you can piece this together and your perspective so that you can have a strong scholarly discussion and still apply this to real life.
Mm-hmm.
I gave real life examples in my answers. So you need to come up with real life examples in your own. And John, I dare say, if I get the pleasure of seeing your answers, I hope you put some sailing references in there.
Absolutely. Well, actually, next weekend, I'm sailing across Chesapeake Bay, so that's going to be fresh in my mind.
Well, hopefully all of this is fresh in your mind, because in all seriousness, the people who did not take this exam seriously are the ones who failed it.
Well, from what I can see, no one has failed it.
Yes, they have.
And they're out of the program?
Yes, they are.
Really? I haven't met any of them yet, so I hope I don't.
Yeah, I have. I actually, when I took my exam, Andre and I were sitting in the back row of the computer lab at Regents. Sorry, I've been to so many colleges this week and my head's going crazy. And we were halfway through the first question, and a woman in the front row got up and walked out and never came back.
Like she fell off the face of the earth?
No, she quit.
She quit.
Quit. As in,
I would hope that they wouldn't let her quit.
Well, John, not everybody can pass the program, and not everybody does.
Yeah.
I just don't want to study.
I'm not going to quit, so.
I don't want to study over Christmas. That's my big push. I have the whole week of Thanksgiving off with work, and I refuse.
And that's it. Give yourself
not be able to relax.
Give yourself something to motivate yourself. Give yourself a reward. We all took the weekend after writtens off and then started fresh Monday morning studying for orals. So if time off is your incentive, E.B. Atkins bought a dog. That was her incentive. If she passed qual, she could buy a dog. So give yourself a reward. This is an intense process.
Oh, it certainly is. It's very intense.
John, you can buy a boat after that.
Yeah, there you go, John.
You know what? I have too many boats as it is. I want to get rid of it. That'll be my reward, get rid of a boat.
Buy you another bottle of wine and we'll drink it in your office.
I like that.
Now.
Yes.
But what I want you to understand is, just like Ecclesiastes says, there is a season. This is just a season. You just have to make it through to writtens. And I guarantee you, Friday night of writtens, that will be the best night of sleep you have ever had in your entire life.
No, after I know that I've passed, that's going to be the best night.
Well, what I would suggest from here on out, I would suggest that you double up your efforts. Whatever you're doing now, double it. Get off social media. Okay? Get off of anything that's going to distract you. Cut out the television watching. Cut out the going out to lunch with friends. No movies, no nothing. Focus.
What makes you think I do any of those things?
Well, I'm not just talking to you, John. But focus on these exams, because they will be over soon, and it is worthwhile to pass them and not have to study over Christmas, as Christy just said. Once you pass the writtens, what I would suggest is find someone that you can send your written exam answers to. I sent mine. What happens is when you take your writtens, you email your answer into Ray Wilmot. And Ray distributes them to the professors, okay? In doing so, you can also send a copy to yourself. So find someone who's already taken the exam, have them look over your written answers, and give you feedback on where your holes might be so that you can study and fill those gaps for orals. Okay? I did it after every single question. You don't have to do it after every single question, but I would suggest that you do it. And I'll tell you why. One, it saved my tail. And two, in the spring group, I looked at, I was telling Christy this earlier, I probably looked at 50 answers. And I went through and looked at the holes that people had in their answers. And I'd say I probably had close to an 80% correct. I am so tired. I apologize. I probably was 80% correct in filling those holes, because when they went into orals, those were the questions they were asked about, and they had studied them based on my response. So find somebody in the program who has already taken the exam, send them your answers, and have them take a look at them for you. You've looked at this stuff so much you can't see straight, but they are fresh eyes. Another thing too, when you walk out of the exam, you will probably know after each one where you need to bump up your studying.
Okay, I have another question.
Yep.
Sorry. The question that you were talking about on having a book proposal or textbook proposal,
right?
Would they ask you that part on the marketing aspect of the book?
They can.
So
the marketing aspect, is that what you said?
Yeah, because when you do a book proposal, besides giving the chapters that you want to suggest for the outline of your book, chapters, the heading and the subheadings, the other aspect of the book proposal or textbook proposal is the marketing. Like, who are your competitors? And you have to actually list specific titles, but in the context of something that in an exam, and you cannot touch the internet to search for that.
Flora, what they would do is, it depends on what question they have you do that on. I was blessed and I had mostly essay questions.
Okay.
Other people got book proposals and different things. With a book proposal, unless you took PR campaigns or organizational comm or what's the other one? Social influence. They're not going to expect you to market the book. You're not going to have time to write that portion of it.
Right.
So unless you took courses that would have that content in it, you're not going to be expected to do the marketing campaign. However, you can put in, this textbook would be marketed to secondary institutions of learning. It would be marketed online through the publisher and available in the school bookstore.
Okay, so a general audience, some kind of general.
Yeah, so you're going to want to know that to that extent. But they're not, unless you took the courses, they're not going to ask you to go deeper than that.
Okay, because my textbook proposal was for academic writing publishing textbook.
Okay. With academic writing, you are going to want to know what journals your dissertation could possibly be published in, or the topic of your dissertation could possibly be published in. And I'll give an example. Christy knows this example because we worked on this paper together. We did a paper on parental attachment, and I was able to look up journals that might possibly be a good fit. Go to a journal ranking site like SCIM. I think it's SCIM, SCRIM or something. Go to a journal ranking site and find a couple journals that relate to your dissertation topic and just put them in the back of your head, because if you throw them in there, they would like that. They want you to know how this is done. In academic writing, you need to know what the process is. You need to know how to submit to a journal. You need to know what journal to submit to. And you need to know what the process is, how the editor gets it, then assigns it to either a junior editor or to PhDs in the field to peer review, what that whole process is.
Okay.
Yeah, someone recently had a question from that, and so it's on the Dropbox, their question and how they answered it and went through. And
okay,
I think it was John Powers. I think he I think he had one like that from what I'm remembering.
Okay. When I get back, I have to start printing out all the answers and questions.
Yeah, it's really helped me. Like this week, I like for theology and comm and some of them that have multiple authors in it, I've printed off every answer that I could find. I've read through their answers, and everywhere that there's an author's name, I highlighted it and highlighted obviously like what they said about that author. And that for me, it has really, really helped to not only see like, okay, what's the little snippet? How have they narrowed down all of the contentions of this author into the one or two statements they're saying about them? But then it's also showing me how they're connecting them. Like they're connecting Augustine with Chesterton. Okay, I need to remember that can be a connection, and just the order. And I'm seeing it very similar in everyone's answers. Where they're placing those authors and what they're connecting them to, and so for me, printing off the questions, reading through them, highlighting them have been huge. It's been a huge part of how I've been studying.
Also, I don't know. When you're reading these works, when you're reading your notes, pull out things like Postman. There's videos on YouTube about Postman. I compared Postman and George Orwell and how they viewed society. Postman was pretty much entertainment, and George Orwell thought that we'd be burning books. So start looking at that type of thing within the classes as well, because you're going to have to use what's in the class in order to look beyond the class, if that makes sense. You need to know the content before you can go outside and pull in references for that content. But there are a bunch of videos about Postman. I think there's some on Peters. There's quite a few videos. There's videos.
Yeah. I posted a video on Facebook the other day about media ecology, and I thought it was great because it pulled in Walter Ong, it pulled in Neil Postman, it pulled in Marshall McLuhan, and I mean it pulled quotes out of their books, the books that we're reading, and I was like, pause, and I wrote down the quote, so that was a really good find. I was like, thank you, Jesus.
So that was an article that you posted?
No, it was a video.
A video. Could you send it to me? Because I'm not a Facebook guy.
Yeah, let me do that right now, or else I will forget.
I actually, talking about Postman, I've been watching Postman YouTube just to keep him in my brain too, because I always enjoyed him, and
his television.
Yeah, oh yeah, he's. But if he was alive today, he'd really be speaking to the whole internet thing. He briefly spoke about computers, but none of. Would he die in 89 or something? I can't remember.
Yeah.
Was it? Yep. Everything he spoke to was in the 80s. Yeah. But good stuff. Great stuff. Good interviews and good lectures.
Okay. So, Flora, John, Christy, as you study this week, work on streamlining. Work on taking those piles and piles and piles of notes and books that you have and streamlining them. By the time you get to qualifying exams, your cheat sheets or notes for each class should be roughly 4 to 6 pages. Okay.
It's already more than that.
What?
It's already more than that.
Well, it is more than that now. What I'm saying, John, is you need to bring it down. You need to start consolidating.
Bring it down,
because
yeah, okay.
2 hours really goes by very, very quickly. And if you run over that 2 hour time frame, you're cutting into the next question's time. So time management is really a big issue with qualifying exams. You've got to be able to go in, data dump information, and just start knocking it out. And if you take 15 minutes too long, that's okay. You'll have an hour and 45 for the next one. But make sure you're very aware of what time you use, how you use it. I talked to Christy earlier, and I said to her if she needed me to do this, and I'll give you two the offer as well. If you want to do a fake written exam on one of your classes, I will conduct one. I will create a question and conduct an exam for 2 hours with you at the time of your choice.
Okay. Well, I've actually already done that for myself.
Good.
Yeah. So, and it stunk. I would have failed myself, but that's okay. It was practice.
If you want to do it and you want feedback on your answers, or if you want to do it on your own and have me give you feedback on your answers, I'd be more than happy to, because you're really starting to run out of time.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, we got plenty of time.